Well, hello and welcome into a very special conversation. I'm Jesse Goldberg-Strassler with the Lansing Lugnuts and the Michigan Baseball Hall of Fame. And we're about to introduce our second member for the class of 2022, Frank Tanana. I'm rejoined by the Lansing Lugnuts Assistant General Manager for Special Events, and this is special, Greg Kiger, who goes back with Lance Parrish some 15 years. Greg, good to see you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it was as a kid growing up in Michigan. Once I saw that Lance Parrish was going to be our first manager with the Great Lakes Loons, I was extremely excited to get to know him and his family, and it was a fun year. Obviously, the first year of the Loons. So Lance and I go back that far, and every once in a while, when he was with the Whitecaps, I tried to reach out and say hi when I was at the ballpark, and it's been fun.
Lance, I know you from I would deliver you a lineup or a roster and you dismiss me with a wink. Good to see you. Thank you for taking the time.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
And Frank Tanana, it's very good to see you and congratulations. We're going to tell some stories. Thank you for taking the time.
You bet, Jesse. Thanks. Appreciate it.
You look very well read compared to everybody else's background here.
Well, it's a prop, but it looks good.
With both of you, Frank and Lance, before you got to be teammates, before your paths crossed, you crossed paths across the country. Frank, you grew up very close to the Detroit Tigers. How far away was Tiger Stadium from when you grew up?
Tiger Stadium was just down Michigan Avenue. I could get to Michigan Avenue real quickly, and the old ballpark was right there at Michigan and Trumbull, so I'd be able to hop a bus and get on over there and see a ball game or two.
And Lance, for you, how far away was Angel Stadium?
Well, I would say probably no more than a half an hour from where I grew up. So even though I didn't make a whole lot of trips to Anaheim Stadium, my parents were from the Pittsburgh area, so they were big Pirates fans. So we usually headed to Dodger Stadium to watch Dodger games. But yeah, it wasn't too far down the road, to be honest with you.
Lance, did you have any feeling that the Angels might be the team to draft you?
I actually did. And it's kind of ironic that Frank grew up here in Michigan and ended up signing with the Angels. And I grew up right down the street from Angel Stadium and ended up being drafted by the Tigers. But I actually I had a workout at Anaheim Stadium my senior year in high school, which I thought I did very well at.
Yeah.
So I had myself convinced that the Angels were going to draft me. And then my high school baseball coach pulled me out of class one day and said, "Congratulations, you're the #1 pick of the Detroit Tigers." And I about fell over because I didn't even know where Detroit was at that time, to be honest.
Lance, did they draft before the Tigers that year, or the Angels, I mean?
Yeah, they did. I think they had the
Right.
#3 pick in the nation.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Frank,
But it worked out.
back to you.
I have no complaints.
That's right.
Frank, did you have any feeling as you're going through your starring high school career that the Tigers would be the team to draft you?
Well, you know what? They certainly saw me, and we had some discussions, and they had a couple of picks before. I think the Angels had the 13th pick, and they would have. I actually think I would have gone a lot higher than either of those two teams had I not had a bad arm. I hurt my arm, and I think that shied off a lot of teams. I had to leave a championship game at the end of my senior season after 4 innings. My arm was just hurting so bad I just couldn't take it anymore. So I thought for sure I was on my way to Duke University to play basketball and baseball. They were going to let me play. But lo and behold, the Angels didn't have a scout at that ball game. And Carl Ackerman, who was the scout, just simply said, "Hey, if this kid's available, I don't think he will be, but if you got to take him." And he had good success with left-handers. He had signed Rudy May and Clyde Wright and a couple of other guys. So they went ahead and drafted me. But I knew Detroit was going to pass because, again, they followed me closely, and they knew at that time, that I had to leave a game because of an arm injury. And that's too much of a gamble to take on a first pick, a pitcher with a bad arm. You just never know about arms. So I got it. why they passed on me.
Lance said that he didn't know where Detroit was. Had you been to the state of California before?
Zero idea. I had just gone outside my little Polish neighborhood a couple of times, and that was about it. We didn't even go to the east side of Detroit. I mean, I was a West Sider, and that was it. Forget about the Angels.
Let me ask each of you about your trip up through the minor leagues. Lance, let's begin with you. Neither one of you was in the minor leagues that long. Tell me about your path to Detroit.
Well, it's kind of a struggle for me, to be very honest with you. First off, they signed me as a third baseman. And I think the only time I had played third base was during my senior year in high school. And that was only because we didn't have anybody else to play third base. I pretty much grew up pitching because I could throw hard, not that I was a great pitcher, and I caught. So when they signed me as a third baseman, I went to rookie ball in Bristol, Virginia as the third baseman. And we ran away with the league, had a great year that year. I think we still have the best. I think they voted us the best team ever in the Appalachian League in 1974. We were 52-17 that year, had a great team. And right after that season was over, I went to instructional ball and was informed that I was no longer going to be playing third base. I was going to be switched to catcher, which was fine by me because I had, like I said, caught all the way from little league through high school. But they also threw in there that they wanted me to switch hit. So I went from playing third base and batting right-handed to catching and switch hitting the next year, which I had never done before. I'd never switch hit in my life. But our farm director, Hoot Evers, at the time when he called me in, said, look, if you could ever learn to hit left-handed, there's no telling how many home runs you would hit with that short porch in right field in Detroit. So it was like, okay, whatever. I'll give it a try. But as soon as my season was over in Lakeland, which was the next step for me on my journey, and I did not have a very good year, they switched me back to hitting right-handed only. So, it was, my first couple of years were kind of a whirlwind as far as things I was asked to do. And my first 3 years in the minor leagues, which I went from rookie ball to A ball to double A, I think I hit below 220 every year. And, but they kept moving me up, which I've said a million times, if I would have been playing today, I'd have never got out of A ball. But I went to triple A the next year and I finally had a pretty good year. I hit 25 home runs and 90 RBIs. And they called me up as a September call up with Lou and Tram. We all came up at the same time. And I stayed up there from that point on.
Frank, you're hurt for your first year in minor league baseball, right? Did they assign you even to be with a team?
They did. It's interesting. I signed with the Angels. I show up at rookie ball camp in Idaho Falls, Idaho, and I can't play for the first week. I can't throw. I tell them my arms bother me. So they fly in Carl Ackerman, the guy that the scout, to identify me because they think I'm phony. They think I'm one of those pretend guys. So they fly in Carl and he has to identify me and say, yeah, this is Frank. And, I went on the pinch run one time that year in 75 games, never did play, went home, came back to spring training, got well. They sent me to Davenport, Iowa, A ball. I played there, came around, went to fall ball in Arizona. The following year, I went El Paso, Salt Lake, Angels, AA, AAA, big leagues. I probably had maybe my best year, or at least one of my best professional careers in El Paso. I was like 16-6, and that was a bandbox of a ballpark. But had a great year, went up to AAA, threw a 2-hit shutout in my first start in AAA. Then they called me up in September of 73, the Angels, and I went 2-2. And after that, they traded away Clyde Wright and opened up a spot for me and was able to begin my big league career in September of 1973.
I want to go back to Davenport, Iowa, because Lance, you've managed there. I've been there as a broadcaster. They still play there in Quad Cities. That's one of the historic towns in the Midwest League.
It is. How's the Mississippi? Because we couldn't start the year that year because it had overflowed, and it was. I'm sure you guys have seen and experienced that too there. But the Mississippi gets a little crazy there.
Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, they have a wall around the entire facility now, so
Yeah.
hold back the water.
Yeah, exactly.
My first trip there, Frank, the mayflies came sweeping in off the Mississippi, and it felt like a plague. Did that happen at any point during your summer?
You know, I remember the Mississippi. I don't remember the flies, though.
Whew.
All right, so I want to get to 1977 because Lance, you've arrived, and Frank, you're not only established in the major leagues. I found a Sports Illustrated article from July 11th, 1977 that says, "This guy Tanana's no second banana." And I'm going to read this description of you. Tanana, a wry, notably unsolemn young man who enjoys nothing more than deflating pomposity wherever he finds it, even within himself. Are you still that way?
You know, thankfully I'm not. I'm a fun-loving guy, but you know, I was at that time very, and you got to be, you know, to make it to the big leagues, you got to be confident, you got to be cocky, you got to be a little bit of, you know, belief in yourself, and I had all that, as most, you know, big league athletes, of course, they all do, but I was over the top. I was a little more arrogant and brashful, and you know, I didn't have much of a governor on my mouth at the time. I would just kind of fire out things and, you know, just say things. And I was a sports writer's dream, but you know, kind of an idiot at times too.
You're 24. Lance, you make it up to the major leagues surrounded by all this great talent that is arriving with you. So great hitting talent in this Tiger system. The first time that you take on the Angels, you've got Tanana and you've got Nolan Ryan as the 1-2 in the starting rotation. What's it like to face Frank and Nolan?
You know, I can relate a story that I remember talking with Steve Kemp, who was our first round draft pick, I think, in 1976 out of USC. He made it to the big leagues before I did. I recall when we were in spring training one of the years after he had made it to the big leagues, we were talking about the Angels and how they had gone out, play on the West Coast, and, you know, Nolan Ryan and Frank Tanana. And I just remember Steve Kemp saying, I would rather face Nolan Ryan any day compared to Frank Tanana. You know, I guess Frank, you know, Frank had a way about him when he wasn't afraid to run the ball inside on lefties or anybody for that matter. And back then he had his blazing fastball. And I think he intimidated a lot of hitters, especially guys hitting from the left side. I faced Frank, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Frankie, after you had some issues with your arms and your velocity had dropped off a little bit. I don't think I ever got to see you when you were, you know, bringing it in the upper 90s or whatever you were throwing it at.
Yeah.
But one thing that I always appreciated about Frank is he knew how to pitch. And, you know, you can say whatever you want about any pitcher out there, but guys like Frank are few and far between now that actually know how to get people out and how to put a little bit on and take a little bit off and stand you up inside and then go away. And I just, you know, I appreciated that when I hit against him, and I appreciated it even more when I ended up catching him in Detroit.
Frank, let me follow up with that because you had that great fastball, but your command, how did you spot the pitches so well, and how did you understand how to use your pitches?
Well, you know, just early on, control was always one of my strengths. You know, from growing up as a kid, always throwing things, football, snowballs, baseballs, you know, aiming at a target, and all of us professional athletes from a young age have just done that. And so was able to really just always could spot the pitches inside, outside, up and down. And when you've got a 95 plus, you know, fastball and it's got some life to it, and you can move it around, and, you know, like Lance said, I was never afraid to, you know, let a guy hit the plate, know that I was out there on the mound. and that, this wasn't fun and games, and he could have some of the plate, but, I need to have some of it too. And so, you just pitch inside, which to me was very effective. I think for a hitter, the best thing in the world is when he walks up to the plate and he's super comfortable and he just knows this guy's, going to be living outside, or, hitters watch. Lance knows that. Hitters watch, they see who's going to bust inside, who's not. And I think it was always to my advantage that hitters knew that, never intended to hurt anybody, but, I'd come inside and I'd come inside a foot, inside just to keep them aware. And so having that control. So when I lost my good stuff, and I think, Lance, you're right. I think in 1978, probably when we first faced each other, I was my arm was hurting me. I pitched that entire season with a sore arm, and my ERA jumped up a whole point from 2.6 to about 3.6. Still won 18 games. And so it was that year really that I showed myself that, hey, even without my overpowering fastball, because of my ability to throw strikes and control all pitches, changeup, curveball, fastball, move it in, move it out, move it up, move it down, that I could still be effective. So I was just blessed just with really good control. One year I struck out like 270, and I think I walked about 70 guys. So, just it was always, sometimes, and even those walks there where after a while you're not going to give in to a hitter. So you're just sometimes going to walk a hitter on occasion that you're just not going to give them something good to hit.
Could you tell immediately which batters were intimidated by you?
Yeah, you know, and some people it was rare, but there were some that actually got better. It like heightened their senses of competitiveness if you were to brush them back or get them off the plate. So those guys you watch, we always watch. Lance knew it as a catcher, even as a hitter. We know each other. We watch each other. We see our reactions. It's a game within a game, and but you do know who that if you can get a little on edge, unnerved, and the likelihood of getting them out increases.
I want to go back to basketball. You mentioned fun and games. You were all set to go to Duke to play basketball. Was there any time for you to play basketball while you were an Angel, and how were your teammates?
Uh, no, it was, there wasn't really much time playing basketball. And of course I was very conscious of health and, real conscious of doing things that might injure me and hinder my progress as a Major League Baseball player. So the basketball was really put on a shelf other than just shooting around. But as far as competing, didn't want to do that. The interesting thing was, when I was hurt earlier, back then, you couldn't be a pro in one sport and play collegiate ball in another like you can today. Back then, once you signed a pro contract, your collegiate was done. You could never go back and play college sports again. So that was definitely a concern because, I was wondering if this career was over even before it started.
You're traded to the Red Sox. Big deal. Fred Lynn, Steve Renko coming back the other way, and you spend 1 year in Boston. How was that year in Boston?
The year in Boston was fantastic, except for the fact sometimes in a rotation we had a pretty good hitting ball club, and we would score runs on a 5-day scale of 7, 6, 1, 9, 6. And I happened to be all year long that guy who was in that day where they just wasn't putting up the runs. And so I ended up with a 4-10 record, decent ERA, and we were a good hitting team. But man, it was a great experience. I love playing for Ralph Houck. Lance, did you play for Ralph? Were you there?
I did. First
Okay.
came up.
Okay, yeah, I love Ralph Houck. He was just a great guy, lover of men, a veteran of the armed forces, and just a wonderful leader of men. I mean, we had Yastrzemski and Rice and Eckersley and Dwight Evans. Man, we had a nice squad. Of course, Lynn was gone, Carlton Fisk was gone, Burleson was gone. They were traded to the Angels in that the big couple of trades that the Angels and Red Sox made.
we're fast forwarding to when you two played together in Detroit, but there's still one more team to get through. You go from the cold climate of Boston to how hot it can get with the Texas Rangers. How was your time with the Rangers?
Man, you talk about hot. We had over 100 days of over 100-degree weather one year in Texas. Yeah, it was smoking hot. And, I really do feel for the Rangers because a visiting team can come in for, 2 or 3 days and that's not a big deal. But you stay at home for 10 days in that kind of heat, it affects you. I had my first year with the Rangers, I ended up losing 19 games. And I'd really gone from the top of the baseball world when I was with the Angels. Now I'm really at the bottom of my baseball career. So much so that the following year they took me out of the rotation. 19 games into the season, I asked Doug Rader, our manager, I said, Doug, what's up here, man? Am I going to pitch? Am I going to play? Why don't you guys just release me? What's going on? And he said, Frank, I'll tell you what, when we get to the 13th inning, you got it. That's your inning. So that's how in low esteem I was held at the time. But lo and behold, the following year, I got a chance to pitch. And it was 1984, and just had a good season with them, so much so. And a great transition had happened in my own personal life. I had become a follower of Jesus Christ. I committed my life to Christ in November 6, 1983. And it just had a wonderful, profound effect the Lord did on my career, on even playing the game of baseball. And so in 84, I've got a good season. And then lo and behold, Milt Wilcox was having arm trouble himself the following year in 85. And then in June, they made a trade. They traded 24 balls and I think a box of bats to the Rangers for Frank Tanana. And so I got to be a Tiger.
Lance, before we get there, I want to get back to the heat because it seems to me nobody wears it like a catcher.
Oh my goodness.
What is it like catching in, whether it's Texas or anywhere, where it's just one of those days?
You're talking about the heat itself?
Yeah. For you as a catcher.
Well, I can tell you there were a number of times, especially when we were playing on AstroTurf or playing in Texas or somewhere where it was extremely hot. I'd look out in the outfield and see those guys stand in the outfield thinking, sure would be nice to be standing out in the outfield doing nothing right now.
For sure.
But, I felt sorry for guys like Jim Sundberg, who had to catch in that Texas heat every single day, every night. We only had to go in there for a few days and we got to get out. But, Frank having to work in that and, guys like Sundberg or Darrell Porter in Kansas City, I can't imagine what that would do to you over the course of time. But, it's no fun. I remember when I told you that I was converted from a third baseman to a catcher in the minor leagues, I went from, catching every once in a while, every couple days a week, maybe in high school, to catching every day in Lakeland, Florida, where it was smoking hot there too.
For sure.
And every single game I caught within a matter of 2 or 3 innings, there wasn't a dry spot on my body. I always tried to wipe my hands off, but I had nothing to wipe my hands off on because everything was wet. My uniform, my catcher's gear, everything. So that was quite the experience. And, I think that swayed me from ever having a desire to play in places like Texas or anywhere else like that weather-wise.
Wait, Lance, weren't you also in Montgomery, Alabama?
I was. And it was smoking hot there too.
All right. Now we've reached, Frank, you were a Detroit Tiger. You're coming back home. When did the two of you first shake hands as teammates?
Well, I'm almost positive we shook hands. I walked into the clubhouse, getting traded. And, I think Lance, no doubt, pitched my first ball game against the Yankees. We ended up winning the game 3-1. And, off we went. with the career. And I got to tell you, it was really one of the highlights of my career to be able to pitch and throw to Lance, a catcher of his stature was just. I only wish it could have gone on longer. It was a great time and a great experience.
Frank, I want to stay right there on that point because 1985, Lance, you won the Gold Glove. So, Frank, what was it like working with Lance specifically? What made him that Gold Glove catcher?
Well, just everything. I mean, a tremendous arm. Nothing got by him. You could throw anything at any time, having complete confidence that Lance was going to catch it. And he was going to catch it well. He was going to block it if he had to. He was going to throw people out. Nobody really ran on him. And I think the fun thing that I remember was Lance would always, he was like he was inside my head. We just never had to, he knew I pitched backwards most of the time. In a fastball situation, you probably were never going to get a fastball. He knew I had control of all my pitches. And like I said, it's just one of the highlights of my career to throw the Lance for the time I got to pitch to him.
Appreciate
Lance, how about
that.
you? How was it working with Frank?
I'll jump back a few years before Frank got there. We had a pitching coach by the name of Roger Craig. And one season before we won the World Championship in '84, when Sparky and Roger were together in Detroit, Sparky made an announcement to all of the pitchers on our staff that Roger was going to call all the pitches for everybody during the course of the rest of the season until he said otherwise. I kind of took that personally. I didn't know if it was me that was considered the problem or they were trying to implement some other philosophy or what. So when I went in and I confronted Sparky about it, he goes, look, here's the deal. He goes, these guys are never going to make it if they always throw fastballs when they're behind in the count. They have to learn how to use their other pitches. And Roger is going to force them to throw their off-speed pitches when they're behind in the count, because that's the only thing that's going to make them better and keep them up here and make us better as a team. So I took that as not so much an indictment on me, but something that Roger and Sparky had planned on implementing with our pitching staff. Now, obviously, there was a few guys that weren't real thrilled about that. But I only say that because Frank would have fit in perfectly there at that time, because Frank, just like he had mentioned, knew that's how you got people out. You couldn't always, when you got behind in the count or when they were looking for a fastball, throw them a fastball. You always mixed in something different. And I think what that did, and what always seemed to work with Frank, was it established a certain level of confidence that you could throw any pitch at any time. And if the hitter knew that, it only worked to your advantage as a pitcher. So it worked pretty well for our pitching staff throughout however long that took place. It didn't go for the entire season, but it went for a while. And it certainly worked well when I was, catching Frank in Detroit, because for me, he was a master. He said that I got inside. I tried to get inside his head. I tried to figure out what he wanted to do and what pitch he might want to throw in any given situation. And he taught me probably more about pitch calling and pitch selection than anybody I'd ever caught before. So, that was a big plus to me behind the plate, just the ability to work with somebody that was as savvy and on top of his game like Frank was.
Appreciate that, Lance.
Did the two of you have any memorable mound meetings?
I can't.
Not really. I think everything went pretty smooth, really.
I can't remember one. I think anytime I would see Lance, I'd see Sparky, and that was not much talking going on then. It was just Lance, nice job. It's not your fault here. I'm getting blasted, and I got to get out of here. I'll see you in the locker room.
Lance, I want to ask you a specific question from 1985 too. I believe that in 1985, you were kissed by Morgana the Kissing Bandit, right?
Well, that did happen. I didn't really remember what year it happened, but yeah, that's a fact. That was, it kind of took me by surprise. We had heard that she was going to be in town. I think her initial target was Kirk Gibson. And he'd made all these crazy statements in the newspaper that if she ran out to kiss him, he was going to rip her top off or something crazy. So I think she chose me as option B. And ironically enough, we were playing the California Angels, and Bob Boone, who's a good friend of mine, was behind the plate. And I had stepped into the batter's box, and I had my head down because I was kind of digging a little toe hold in the box. And all of a sudden I heard the crowd erupt, and I was kind of looking around to see where it was coming from. And all of a sudden I looked up, and here she had jumped over that little pony wall there right by the on deck circle on the Angels side. And she's running right at me. And I was like almost like I didn't know what to do. And then Bob looked at her and looked at me and got a big smile on his face. And I figured, I might as well just go with it. So I leaned over and she gave me a little peck on the cheek, and then she ran off and they snagged her and hauled her off. But it's good for a couple laughs.
Oh. Frank, back to you about Sparky. And let me ask each of you, but first you, Frank, what was it like to play for Sparky Anderson?
Well, it really was, I enjoyed it. Sparky was great, I think, with veterans. As Lance can remember, a little tough on the young guys. He'd say some things, but there was a method to his madness with the young guys. He wanted to find out early what they had, whether they could make it, could they take some heat, could they take some pressure, and if not, he was going to move them on and find somebody else who could do it. But with veterans, I think he had a great respect for guys who'd been in the league for a while. I know we had a love-hate relationship. I loved the fact that I was on his team with a lot of great players. He hated the fact that I couldn't throw very hard. In fact, after I beat the Yankees in my first start, after he got a chance to watch, he'd seen me before, but now he got a chance to watch me on his team. He came in the next day and I was sitting in my locker, and I said, as I see him coming over, I said, oh man, he's, this is going to be good. Sparky likes winners. I just won a game for him. Man, I can't wait to see what he's got to say. And he looks at me and he says one word. He says, how? I said, what do you mean how? He said, how are you getting anybody out with that crap you're throwing? How are you doing it? And I said, Sparky, just sit back and enjoy, because this is what we got. And you just keep putting me between Morris and Petrie, couple of flamethrowers, just throw me on out there. And but we had a good laugh about it. But I really did love playing with him. He had a couple of rules. Basically, you're going to give me everything you've got. But first, you're going to be on time. You're going to be on time. You're going to give me everything you got, and we are a family. He was big on that. We spent a lot of time together, as Lance knows. Ball club spends more time together than you do with even your own family. So now, he had good guys on his team. He wanted guys to get along, and if there was a guy that wasn't going to get along, he wasn't there very long. And I think Lance can attest to that. There were a couple of guys. I think, of course, we did have a couple of guys that they were so good that they could just say and do pretty much what they wanted, but because they were the stars of the team. And, we mentioned no names, but Lance knows who we're talking about. So but it was all good. I really did enjoy playing for Sparky.
Lance, how about you? How was playing for Sparky Anderson?
Well, in the very beginning, I disliked him very much. And it wasn't because of Sparky Anderson. It was because Les Moss was the manager of the team before Sparky took over. Les Moss was my AA manager and AAA manager. And I've said over and over that if it wasn't for Les Moss, I probably never would have got to the big leagues. Thought he was a great teacher, great baseball man. I admired him a lot. And when Ralph Houck stepped down, Les became the manager. And he was manager for a couple months, it seemed like.
Mhm.
We had just come back from a West Coast trip and had just gotten our record, I believe, over 500. And the next thing I know, Les Moss has been fired and Sparky Anderson was named to replace him as manager. So I was very disappointed, number one. I didn't know Sparky Anderson at all, other than he managed the Big Red Machine down in Cincinnati. But I was just very disappointed for Les. I thought that he deserved better. And I thought that having had the opportunity, he could have done some great things in Detroit. But, that's, as Ernie Harwell would say, that's baseball. And when Sparky came over, initially, like Frank said, he wasn't real big on young guys. But I'm sure taking over the team that he took over, he knew that we were a rebuilding team and that he was, I think, set at the very beginning of the process of letting everybody know who the boss was. So, it started with no facial hair. You got to wear suit and ties on the road. He explained the rules of the clubhouse. He doesn't want to ever see any clothes laying on the floor. You treat everybody with respect that walks through that door. I mean, there was a number of things that everybody had to pay attention to. And as Frank said, if you weren't willing to listen to Sparky and toe that line, you were gone. And we always joke about, when he would have his meetings, he would have his little analogies that he would throw around. And he often would say, I have a garden back in California that I keep when I'm home. And, I have certain plants that I love. And, I grow my tomatoes and I grow whatever, my cucumbers. And he goes, every once in a while, a weed pops up. And he goes, when a weed pops up, I just walk over and pluck it right out of my garden and get rid of it. So obviously he was making reference to don't be a weed in his clubhouse, because if you were, he had the power to get rid of you. And he did with a few guys, which will remain nameless. But, I just think that he wanted to establish that he was the boss and, you follow him and abide by his rules and things will go well. And, once I got to know him and appreciate him and, his love for the game and, obviously all of our relationships grew with him. I really learned to love the guy. He was a lot of fun. Sometimes he'd call me in his office to have a conversation with me and he'd start on one subject and end up on who knows what. And I'd leave the office never knowing what the heck he was trying to tell me. So that's just Sparky.
Yeah,
But
it was.
we won a world championship under him, so it was all good.
Yeah, I got one story. Sparky, he was in charge, and there was one time though he really usurped some place that he shouldn't have gone. We were in a meeting in spring training, and somebody had said something in the paper so he gathered us around. He said, "You know what, boys? Around here, I'm God." And a couple of us looked at each other and just kind of, shook our heads and said, "Spark, you may have gone a little too far here." So lo and behold, that first hitter's trammel up for batting practice, and Sparky's behind the cage at the fence behind second base where you're protected. But he wanders away from that cage, and the first pitch, batting practice, Tram hits a line shot up the middle, hits Sparky right in the head. Down goes Sparky. He's not out, but he's down. So they walk him into the clubhouse, and I couldn't resist. I just couldn't resist. I walked in a few minutes later and I said, "Spark, how you doing?" He's got a nice bag on his head where the ball hit him. And he said, "Oh, Frankie boy, I'm fine. It's all good. I'll be okay." And I said, "Spark, just let me just mention something to you that, what, Spark, you mentioned your God, but God just gave you a little bit of Don't ever say that again, please, because you're not. You just got a little warning, and nothing happens by accident. Don't do it, Spark. He didn't take too kindly to that, but he ushered me out of the room. But I couldn't pass that up. I really couldn't.
Lance, in 1987, you leave the Tigers, and I want to come back to each of you coming back home because first Lance to the Phillies, but then you do get the chance to play for your hometown Angels for 4 years. How was that?
It was awesome. It was awesome. I had a little bit of a rough time in Philadelphia. So having the opportunity to go back home and live in my own house, my wife and I still had a home out there, and got to be there for almost 4 years. It was awesome being able to drive to the ballpark and playing. I mean, as Frank can attest, there's no place like home. I know he loved coming back to Detroit and playing home there, but the weather in Anaheim is second to none.
It's the best.
And, I don't think it ever rained one day that we were there. And it seemed like it was just the perfect baseball weather every single day we went to the ballpark. So can't hardly beat that. Plus we had a good team, a lot of good guys on that team. Frank mentioned that he played for Doug Rader. Well, Doug Rader was the manager of the Angels when I was there. And you talk about a character, and they had to write a book about him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he did some things that, we still talk about. He was a lot of fun to be around. I think he had learned his lesson on trying to be, a mean, obnoxious, demanding kind of a guy in Texas. So he was a little more loosened up by the time he got to Anaheim, and, he was a little more fun to play with. But being there and playing with guys, Jim Abbott was there. He had made the team. Catching him was a lot of fun. Chuck Finley, Mark Langston, Burt Blyleven, Brian Harvey was our closer, Kirk McCall. We had a great pitching staff.
Mm-hmm.
And guys like Dave Winfield ended up out there, Dave Parker, Chili Davis, Brian Downing. I go down the list. Devon White. We had some great players. It's almost amazing to me we didn't do better than we actually did. But I enjoyed my time there. Would have liked to have probably stayed there throughout the rest of my career if I couldn't play in Detroit, but it wasn't meant to be. But the time that I spent there was very, very enjoyable.
Are there any Doug Rader stories that you can share?
No.
Frank, about that whole notion of coming back home, when you come back to play for the Tigers, how many friends and family did you have watching you pitch?
Well, you know what? I had just all the kids that I grew up with, all the buddies from high school, my family, my mom, dad, sisters, aunts, uncles. It really was a gift from the Lord to be able to come back and play in my hometown. Very, very grateful, very, very thankful to join the world champion Tigers. At that stage of my career was, like I said, a real gift from the Lord. It added years to my career, no doubt about it. Was able to just be a part of, and there's when you're on a great ball club, they elevate you, they make you better, and consequently, when you're on a bad ball club, because it takes a team. No one guy can do it, but man, to come back and realize really a boyhood dream. I mean, if you think about it, every kid playing ball dreams of playing in the big leagues, playing for their hometown. And now to get there and put on that English D in Old Tiger Stadium, pitching against the Yankees, pitching to Lance Parrish, with Sparky Anderson as your manager, Kirk Gibson and Lemon and Herndon and Brookins, Trammell, Evans, oh my goodness, Petrie, Morris, Hernandez, what a team we had. And again, Lance and I both, we both know this, had they been more interested in world championships, we could have had a dynasty. I mean, that team was that good, but they would add things in September for us on occasion. They would give us a player or two, but they were real big on free agency. I think they had just pretty much gone into it really late, if my memory serves me right. They got Evans but they came to the party late, and they had some financial, their club, their decisions that they made. But boy, oh boy, man, you looked around, and we all looked around and just went, there wasn't a better team really around. With another addition or two, I think Lance would concur that could have been a dynasty.
Well, I was hoping that when I ended up leaving, which I didn't really want to leave, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
When I went to Philadelphia, I was thinking, I hope that the Tigers really end up missing my presence there. And I was having the worst time in Philadelphia. And even though I didn't really know Matt Noakes at the time, he came up and had just one heck of a year. And it was like, you know what? They never missed a beat. I mean, Matt Noakes hit 30 home runs, and I don't know how many RBIs he had, but he had a really, really good year, which I'm very happy for him for doing. But, I was over there scuffling in Philly, and it was like, you know what? The Tigers have forgotten about me already.
Well, Lance, and that's the thing about sports. I mean, really here today, gone tomorrow.
Exactly.
And, you just enjoy and treasure each moment, each memory. And we've had a lot of good ones.
Sure have.
Frank, there's a quote that I remember reading from you. Tell me if this is true. In the 70s, I threw in the 90s. In the 90s, I threw in the 70s. Did you really say that?
Well, you know what? It was either me or somebody. I'm not who to attribute that to, but it was very, very true.
With each of you guys, you played from the 1970s through the 1990s. Baseball changed significantly during that time. So let me ask each of you, beginning with you, Frank, how did you see baseball and the landscape change from when you came up to when you retired?
Oh man, it just came. It really comes down to one thing. The game was the same, but you had you had the introduction of steroids. You had the introduction of performance enhancing drugs, um, uh, and guys just got guys got bigger. I mean, they just got bigger. You look back at some of the pictures and all of that, but to me, that was really the big change that occurred.
Lance, what do you think about from the 70s to when you finished playing in the mid 1990s?
Well, that was obviously what Frank said was the landscape in that regard, started to change. I don't think that the game from the start of my career to the end of my career changed all that much itself. None of the rules had really changed. The game was pretty much played the same. But when I stepped away from the game and my career was over, I've noticed a whole lot of things that are changing now. The game is evolving. They're implementing more and more different aspects to the game. It's become a big analytic influence in the game of baseball. They've changed some of the rules as far as what pitchers are allowed to do and not allowed to do, the base running aspect of it. I just think that, the game from the time we both left has changed way more dramatically than from the start of our career to the end of our career.
Yeah.
But I do
if I might interject something real quick, just popped into my head. I think you saw when I first came up, if a starting pitcher was worth anything, he went 8 innings. He went 9 innings. The size of the bullpens were, I mean, we might have had nine guys, 9 pitchers when I first started. One year I threw 288 innings out of a possible 312 that my team played, completed 24 games one year. So I think that was kind of, you saw it towards the end of the 90s. And of course, even more so now is some of these staffs have 14 pitchers on them. And so I think that's a huge transition, along with the things that Lance was talking about with the analytics. But I think pitching, wouldn't you say, Lance, the constant
absolutely
change of
agree with that.
pitchers?
Yep.
Yeah.
Frank, you had arm issues that changed how you pitched. We are seeing pitchers even today as they're trying to limit their innings and limit their pitch counts. They can't stop their arm issues from recurring. How in the world do we take care of health for pitchers?
That's a, I don't know. All I know is, I don't have an answer to that. I really, really don't. I do know this much in the youth in particular. You're seeing a lot of, you can't just throw year round. I mean, you want to throw a lot and you want to strengthen your arm and all of that, but you just can't pitch 12 months out of the year. You're seeing kids especially having arm trouble and things like that. And I don't know if it's the way these guys are throwing, but the other thing being too, if you're going to bulk up and you're going to just fire out 100 miles an hour, that's not going to last. You got to change speeds. So I really don't know why, but I do know the throwing motion's an unnatural motion. Arm injuries have always been the case. And it's just always going to be that. There is no, some guys last 20, some guys last, 20 years, some guys last 20 minutes. And I was very fortunate and thank the Lord for the career that I had, but the throwing motion's an unnatural motion for the arm. And there's, it's always going to be some arm issues. Lance, I don't know, what are your thoughts on that, bud?
Well, I remember you mentioning at the beginning of this that you were out, throwing rocks, throwing footballs, throwing everything when you were a kid. I was the same way.
Right.
I didn't play baseball other than during baseball season.
Right.
I played football. I played basketball. I was out in the open spaces throwing rocks and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I think just taking some of the stress off of my arm after the baseball season was over allowed it to, heal up and continue to develop. I was very, very fortunate. I never had any arm issues. But I mean, I was a catcher, obviously I wasn't a pitcher, but I did a lot of throwing behind the plate. I never had any arm problems. I do believe that, things are a little bit different now. Obviously I think back to you and Jack threw a lot of complete games. He went as deep into games. And I think that was expected of starting pitchers. They wanted starting pitchers to go as deep into the game as they could. But now they've kind of restructured that where if you can get 5 innings out of your starter or 6 innings, then the bullpen takes over and the starter has done his job. So in that standpoint, I totally agree with you. The game has changed significantly where pitching is concerned.
Yeah.
Let's correct my memory if I'm wrong. You managed Clayton Kershaw in the minor leagues, right?
I did.
What was it like managing a young lefty like that? Now he's at the forefront of the how long Kershaw stay in the game, because as long as he's in, he's dominating. How is it seeing him young?
What's interesting is the year that I managed in Midland, Clayton Kershaw was on our starting rotation. And I always thought that he was really good, but I never in my wildest dreams would have imagined him being as good as he turned out to be. I mean, he put up some numbers, well, obviously in the big leagues with the Dodgers that are incredible, rival anybody season to season. But the other part of that equation was my backup catcher that year was Kenley Jansen, who turned out to be the closer for the Dodgers when they converted him, from being a catcher to a pitcher, because he had a great arm. But that was after I left the organization. And the next thing I know, I see Kenley Jansen pitching on TV. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. And he turned out to be one heck of a closer. So, and he's still going and has had a tremendous career. So I had a couple guys there that were, very, very talented. And it was a lot of fun. Great being in that ballpark. And, it was the inaugural year of the Dow Diamond and all that in Midland. And it was a lot of fun, but I guess I didn't impress too many people because I only lasted 1 year there.
Minor leagues are a little bit different, though, for that experience compared to when each of you was coming up through the minors. Frank, how has your post-playing career been, and what have you done?
You know what? My post-playing career has been fabulous. Like I said, I came to Christ halfway through my career. And at the end of my career, I was just able to become more involved in my local church and just doing a lot of speaking, sharing the gospel, sharing Jesus Christ with as many people as I can. doing Bible studies with guys, one-on-one and in small groups. Kathy and I have had we have 4 married daughters, 14 grandchildren. So that's keeping us busy. So, God has been very, very good to me, and I've just enjoying living for His glory and serving Jesus in these last days, and just enjoying, this stage of my life.
This has been a joy catching up with each of you, hearing your memories and recollections, tracing all the way from high school, all the way through your baseball career and beyond, especially with the Detroit Tigers. But Frank, from Detroit Catholic Central and then to the Tigers. So I thank you both. Lance, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. My
Yeah,
pleasure.
thanks, Jess. Thanks, Greg. Hey, Lance, thanks for being on, man.
Oh, thank you.
Blast sharing this with you. It's been a good hour. Been a lot of fun.
Thank you, buddy. All right. Appreciate it.
All
Greg
right.
Kiger, any final thoughts?
No, I was going to bring up Clayton Kershaw and tied everything together, but seeing what he did yesterday and his manager coming out, and he's had a few injuries, and Frank being a pitcher, having a guy come out and 7 innings, perfect game. It's where do you go with that? Here's where you go. Yeah, here's where you go, Greg. A young Clayton Kershaw would have been ticked. And old Clayton Kershaw, with all that he's done in the game, said, "Thank you very much. It's been a nice game, and I'll live to pitch another day." He missed the playoffs last year, bad arm. A young Clayton, like I said, and Lance knows this, a young guy would have been ticked because he would have wanted that because he hadn't established himself. But I think an old Clayton was just fine with that.
And on that note, the Michigan Baseball Hall of Fame induction for Frank Tanana and for Steve Avery will be on July the 9th at Jackson Field. For Lance Parrish, Frank Tanana, and Greg Kiger, I'm Jesse Goldberg-Strassler, and thank you for your time listening.